Imagine that you've just retired and your financial advisor tells you to put $1 million on a hand of blackjack. Would you do it? Well, for most retirees, Roth conversions actually have worse odds, and today I'm going to prove it. My name's Amzalag. I'm a certified financial planner and the owner of Peak Financial Planning. And in just the last 2 years, I've built more than 150 retirement plans. And by far the most common question I get is, should I do Roth conversions? So in the next few minutes, I'm going to run 3 case studies, a $1 million, $3 million, and $5 million household to show how to avoid a $1 million tax mistake that financial software and advisors keep recommending. We're going to use Social Security data and Income Lab's modern guardrails to stress test Roth conversion recommendations. And at the end of the video, I'm going to give you a simple checklist that you can use to decide if a Roth conversion actually makes sense in your plan. So I'm going to spend 90% of this video showing you everything inside software and spreadsheets. But before we dive in, we need to start with some assumptions. And if you stick with me, I promise that your understanding of Roth conversions will change forever. So the first assumption is that all 3 of the tested households I'm going to show are ages 62 and are fully retired. The second assumption is that Social Security is going to be the only guaranteed source of income starting at 67 in all 3 scenarios. The third assumption is that Income Labs is going to be set to a 20% likelihood of needing a spending adjustment, which is essentially like planning for an 80% probability of success. The fourth assumption here is going to be that smaller households have more pre-tax savings and bigger households have more after-tax savings. And then finally, the last assumption is that all the plans I'm going to show are run for exactly 30 years, which is how long the top 20% of retirees live according to Social Security lifetimes tables. Now, I've already loaded all of these assumptions into Income Lab, so we're just going to jump right in. In the first scenario that I'm showing here on the screen, Mike and Laura Test have $1 million saved, and almost all of it is in pre-tax accounts. Now, Income Lab's optimal recommended strategy here recommends filling the 12% bracket with Roth conversions. Now, the software projects that they'd save about $92,000 in taxes and have the same amount in additional net spending money in retirement. And when I showed this to Mike and Laura, this screen specifically, their eyes lit up. They said, "Eric, that is incredible. Why wouldn't we do that?" And that's exactly the reaction that most retirees and even most financial planners have when they see a screen like this with all these pretty green boxes. And the $3 million and $5 million versions of these plans are no exception. They look even better. So let's toggle through those real quickly. At $3 million here, you can see that Income Labs is recommending conversions to fill the 24% bracket and showing over $600,000 in projected tax savings and additional spendable money. Let's toggle to the $5 million plan really quickly. At $5 million, it says to fill the 32% bracket with a supposed $1.2 million reduction in taxes paid and additional $1.2 million in net income or lifetime spending money. And so the bigger the portfolio, the bigger and sexier the Roth conversion looks. But here's the problem. These projections assume extremely long lifespans that very few people actually live. And Roth conversions only start paying off very late in retirement after you've already passed the break-even age. And so to prove the point, I've rebuilt each plan in Income Labs, but this time I just shortened the time horizon from 30 years to 25 years. Everything else stayed the same. And for that, I have this summary table right here just to make viewing and clicking a little easier. In the $1 million plan, which you can see right here, the software changes the conversion recommendation to convert to fill the 10% bracket and really recommends only spending about $10,000 on Roth conversions as compared to the $118,000 it recommended spending in the prior scenario. Now, the translation of that is that 5 fewer years of life turned a 6-figure Roth strategy into pretty much nothing, right? The second scenario here is the $3 million plan. And in this plan here, you can see that now the software recommends converting up to the 12% bracket rather than the 24% bracket. And instead of spending $646,000 on Roth conversion taxes, that's dropped down to $76,000. And the translation for this one is that $500,000 benefit literally just disappears by shortening the plan by 5 years. And finally, in the $5 million plan, the recommendations just completely collapse from a $1.2 million benefit, which you can see right here, and from converting through the 32% bracket to converting just spending just $231,000 on taxes and getting a very, very small benefit, if at all. And so here's what this really means. If you live 5 years less than the software assumes, then Roth conversions flip from being a 6 or 7 figure win to a potential 6 or 7 figure loss. And so now let's overlay this with actual survival data, because the key point here is that Roth conversions pay off the longer you live, and we're planning for everybody as though they're going to live very long. But the question is, how long do people actually live, and what is the probability that this bet, this gamble, will actually pay off? And so according to the Social Security life expectancy tables, a single 62-year-old man has just a 14% chance of living to 92. That is the final life expectancy in the plans I've shown, by the way. For women, that chance of living to 92 is 23%. And for a married couple, there's a 1 in 3, so 33% chance that at least one spouse will make it that far to age 92. And so 2/3 of the time, Roth conversions that require you to live to 92 will fail. And said differently, if you framed Roth conversions honestly, you would say you have a 1/3 chance of winning and a 2/3 chance of losing. Would you still make this $1 million or this $500,000 or this $100,000 bet, depending on what wealth bracket your household fell into? Now, saying this out loud almost feels illegal, right? It kind of feels like I'm talking about the risk of planning for a long life expectancy feels completely taboo in financial planning, because we've all been conditioned to think that we are going to live a lot longer and that longer is always better. But and I'm not saying you shouldn't live longer, I'm just saying we have to understand the trade-offs. And here's the truth. In a world where Roth conversions are treated like financial gospel, they actually increase risk when you assume a very long life. And the craziest part is that most financial planners and retirees will never notice it or never get told. So in just a minute, I'm going to show you a checklist to decide if Roth conversions actually make sense for you. But first, let's go back to this spreadsheet that I had on the screen a moment ago. See, a 62-year-old is twice as likely to live until 87 as they are to make it to 92. And so the odds of living that additional 5 years drops in half. The difference between planning for a 30-year versus 25 years is not just a technical setting. It's a complete gamble with real dollars on the line. And as you can see in the red cells that I've just shown here, that gamble can be massive. The gamble column here is basically the difference in dollars that the household would have spent on taxes if they assumed they would live 5 years longer. You can see in the $5 million household net worth scenario, that household would have spent almost $1 million more on Roth conversions if they assumed they had a high likelihood of living through 30 years as opposed to 25. And I'm not saying they shouldn't, but you should know that information, right? It's a real gamble. Now, most financial softwares and the advisors using it will never reduce life expectancy in the software to test what negative outcomes might occur because they just assume there are no negative outcomes, right? Usually you'd think that a shorter lifespan means fewer years of withdrawals, fewer years in retirement, and therefore your portfolio lasts, right? But when you introduce Roth conversions, you're actually introducing an expense that's actually a gamble investment on longevity. And so now that we've seen how fragile Roth conversion wins really are, let's talk about a couple additional hidden risks that almost nobody factors in. The first is that Roth conversions are a gamble, which we've been talking about. They're just not an action with a guaranteed return. But the way financial planning software looks when you click to a screen like this, it makes it appear as though it is a guaranteed return. There's no indication of probability or likelihood of it working. It just looks like it works. The second hidden factor is, you might say, I'm going to do Roth conversions for my heirs, so it may still be worth it. And that may be true, but we don't actually know whether our heirs will be in a lower tax bracket when distributing than we will be while converting. Now, it still may be wise to convert. You may just be doing it at a loss, which is totally fine if you plan to think of the cost of the Roth conversion as a prepaid gift to your heirs. The third hidden factor here is that the illustrations I've shown today don't even include a time value of money component. See, the financial planning software calculates the benefit of the Roth conversion as the tax you save once you've passed the break-even threshold. But that's actually inaccurate because in reality, money early in life is worth more than money later in life. And so to be truly honest about the actual financial payoff of Roth conversions, you would have to apply a time value of money factor. And financial planning softwares and those that rely on them don't actually receive that. The fourth and final note here is, which could be a whole video on itself, truth be told, is that financial planning software does not show the substantial increase in risk that occurs as a result of the huge increase in spending and withdrawals caused by the upfront cost of the Roth conversion. See, depending on the size of the Roth conversion, retirees could unknowingly expose themselves to significant extra withdrawal rate and sequence of returns risk. That, or they just might have to make huge sacrifices to quality of life in early retirement in order to subsidize the cost of those Roth conversions. But who really cares about the quality of life when you're young, healthy, and in the best part of your retirement when you could prepay the government taxes and get a gold star for having a higher end of life after tax legacy if you live till age 95? And if you couldn't catch my sarcasm there, I'll just say it out loud, which that's crazy, right? The translation here is you could just end up sacrificing the best years of your retirement just to prepay the IRS money for no reason. And so with all of that said, here's a simple checklist that you can use to evaluate whether a Roth conversion actually makes sense in your retirement plan. And it can. I know I've come on strong in this video, but the truth is there are a place for Roth conversions in retirement planning. So the checklist is as follows. If you have less than $2 million, ask yourself, do you expect your guaranteed retirement income to exceed your pre-retirement income? And if the answer is yes, that means consider a small conversion because you're probably going to be in a higher tax bracket in retirement than you were before retirement, because your guaranteed income would exceed your pre-retirement income. And if you answer no, then most likely you're going to want to skip Roth conversions because it's almost always going to be a net negative in your lifetime. If you have between $2 million and $4 million in retirement savings, then you ask yourself, do you have after-tax money to live on while converting or to apply to the cost of the conversion? You might also ask yourself, can you retire early enough to create an income gap before Social Security starts so you can do Roth conversions before extra income sources kick in? You might also ask yourself, is there a widow penalty risk in your household? Meaning, do you have a spouse, for instance, a wife who is significantly younger than a husband and might live several years or many years longer than their husband? And then the final question you'd ask is, will IRMA or RMDs push you into higher brackets later? And if you can say yes to most of those things, then it may be worth modeling Roth conversions. Now, finally, if you have $4 million or more in retirement savings, then Roth conversions probably do deserve a look, primarily for legacy planning purposes and not necessarily maximizing your own retirement lifestyle. But you'll find that there are more cases once you reach that threshold of wealth where Roth conversions will financially make sense while you're alive. The other obvious area where Roth conversions will make sense while alive, or Roth contributions rather, would be when you're younger, right? Every year you start doing Roth contributions, the more likely they are to pay off, because you have a longer period of life ahead of you within which the investment will pay off. And so at the end here's the bottom line. Roth conversions are not the sure thing strategy that they're sold as. They are a bet. They're a bet on how long you'll live, what tax brackets will look like, and what your heirs' situation might be. And most of the time, that bet will fail. One client told me after we ran this analysis, I thought I was being smart prepaying taxes, but it turns out I was just giving the IRS a bigger gift. And that's the moment it really clicked for them. Now, that doesn't mean Roth conversions are always bad. It just means you need to treat them for what they are, which is an investment or a gamble that only makes sense under very specific circumstances. And if you don't want to gamble your retirement on a coin flip or on a blackjack hand, then click the first link in the description below this video to watch my free webinar on the 4-step system we use at Peak Financial Planning to stress test retirement strategies. Thank you as always for your time and attention. And if this video gave you some clarity, hit the like button so it reaches more retirees who need to hear it, and subscribe for more deep dives just like this one. I'll see you in the next video.